a morning get together for those who want to attend. So there's a lot happening in New York Media Initiative in the days ahead. I'm excited about it. I hope you are. So tonight, Cliff is a wonderful friend, and it's almost like that's all I want to say. I just love Cliff.
Perfect.
and so grateful for him and in our group, and I think you will find him a warm friend as well if you don't already know him. He wrote a novel, and I'll hold it up for everybody, called Cliff Falls. It's a wonderful book, and I can read just one of two things that are said. This is from the Paul Peterson from the Donna Reed Show. Now, I'm old enough to remember the Donna Reed Show, though, but some of you may not. But it was one of the biggest shows in television. And he says, I believe it presents the best fictional rendition of the kid actor saga I've ever read. I sat up through the dark hours reading this book. It kept me turning the pages and filled me with a sense of hope. The book just went viral, I think would be right to say. And it has made Cliff a speaker around the country. He travels and speaks, and we are so fortunate to have him as a part of our group and as our speaker tonight. We had him speak back in spring to our men's group, and we all were on the edge of our seats, I think. And I said, Cliff, if you want to just say the same thing you said last time, that's fine. Or if you want to do something new. So anyway, Cliff, I'm turning it over to you. The evening is yours. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. And wow, I've so enjoyed being part of this group, about this fellowship. Means so much to me. Tonight, I'm going to share a little bit about the book and a little bit of my story. And I do it in the hope that you may find your own story. The book is called Cliff Falls, and what I really speak about, what I've spoken about for the last 12 years, traveling the whole country, treatment places, Christian colleges, Rotaries, you name it, is the metaphor of going over the falls in life. When you're separated from everything you've put your identity in, good or bad. And that's a scary place to be. The book itself, it was lightning in a bottle. I didn't expect it to go anywhere. Some of you might know Michael Flaherty. He was the president of Walden Media, and he read my screenplay and he said, all our movies are based on books. Why don't you write this as a book? And I'm like, that's hard. But I did it, and the book took off. So a lot of people have gotten behind it. We did an audiobook this last year, and it got nominated for Best Faith-Based Audiobook of the Year. Great guy did it, Santino Fontana. He was the bad guy in Frozen, and he's been in a bunch of things. But let me do this. It's about a former child star who is hiding in a church, and it's the cultures of Hollywood culture and church culture colliding in a world where entertainment can sometimes be our religion and religion can sometimes be our entertainment. It asks the question, what does it mean to be human? And ultimately, it's about understanding your identity as a beloved child of God. So I want to just read one passage, the falls of the metaphor, and the main character, Clay Grant, the former child star, he's like, are the falls really real? They're kind of hard to find. People get lost. He's afraid of being disappointed. It's just going to be a trickling stream. And this scene is where he comes upon the falls. And for anyone who's been through anything, and I'm sure we all have, when God shows up, there's no question who it is. So, thank you. Clay squinted from the bright sun as he exited the church, somehow embarrassed that he'd gotten so emotional. The pastor had been very kind, but was Clay really going to spend the rest of the afternoon repeating that phrase in his head? He found that in spite of himself, he did just that. He felt ridiculous walking around town telling himself he was the beloved of God, but he did it anyhow. He passed the library and he said it again when he reached the town square. You are my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased. He said it again and again. And each time the vivid memories and accusing voices returned, but he just kept repeating it, allowing the words to enter his spirit and permeate him in an unexpected way. Soon he wasn't repeating it anymore. He was hearing it. And it wasn't his own voice. It was another one, more tender. You are my beloved son, in whom I'm well pleased. As people passed him on the street, he pictured God saying it to them. You are my beloved daughter. You are my beloved son. The voice was so strong, he wondered if they could hear it. He made his way up the rustic trail, the words repeating in his spirit. He noticed the magnificent oaks that lined his path. In the stillness, he listened to the quiet rustling of leaves as he continued along the trail. Soon he came upon the rushing falls the city was named for. 3 separate falls, emanating from one source. The sight was majestic. Light filtered through the golden oak leaves above the rushing waters. Standing on a rock, he could see his shadow on the opposite bank of the river. The roar of the water plunging over the cliff, the outflow emptying into the river, cascading over the falls. Everything he was carrying was being swept away. The mighty roar was consuming him. The mighty roar was calling out his name. You are my beloved son, in whom I'm well pleased. The falls made everything come alive. He breathed in deeply. It was as if he was taking his first breath. By the time the sun had set, something had changed. He had changed. Clay sat on a rock looking over the river, the moon illuminating the rushing waters. He removed his journal from his backpack, opened the last pages, the only blank ones, and began to write. The falls are flowing through me now. It's like I've sunk deep beneath the water, gasping for air. They came up the other side. It wasn't safe. It wasn't supposed to be. But I'm all right, and I'm not alone. I don't know which was more frightening, God or life. When you're underneath, you're alone, and it's scary, and for a few moments, unbearable. But then you emerge, and you're all right, and somehow changed. The transformation that had eluded him, like all observers who just stand on the banks, was finally there. Knowing who you are not is always the beginning of change. But until you hear your true name, you will wander. And perhaps all should for a time. All right. Thank you. I've spoken many places. The one that means the most to me was an invitation to speak at the Betty Ford Center. And to speak there in front of 500 people in the Annenberg Center. They got actors to act out scenes from my novel first. And these are all people who are in that place. People, many of which were in the middle of detox. I was getting a lot of attention the week before. I'll go into my own story in a bit, but I had been isolated for years and the book takes off. And now I'm getting this attention. Guidepost did a big article that was released that week. NBC interviewed me. This was all word of mouth without a publicist. The Desert Sun out in the desert, Palm Springs, had the front of their entertainment section, big picture of me, and whole article about the impact of the book and how it's helping people. And something wasn't sitting well with me. I didn't want to give the same talk that I had given all the other places. I really wanted something that would reach these people. I've barely drank. I've never done a drug in my life. I grew up faith, the biggest part of my life since I can remember. I wanted to make sure whatever I was saying was going to make a difference. So I went up the street to this pizza place that I've been going to since 5th grade, Tony's Pizza. And I just wanted you know, those moments, you just want something that's just like a BLT, just something that's just a normal, something that grounds you, right? Just in who you are apart from anything else. So I got a slice of cheese pizza. And when I walked in there, there was a kid, Rob, who I hadn't seen him in about 6 months. And I'm like, first of all, Rob is like the charismatic guy in there. Like he's the reason the place is that popular. The girls come in to see him. The guys want to be like Rob. He's confident. He's good looking. He's that guy, right? And I'm like, Rob, where have you been? I haven't seen you in like 6 months. And in that moment, he got kind of bashful. And he looked down. And I could tell he was trying to decide if he was going to tell me the truth or not. And they looked at me and said, Cliff, I just got out of the Betty Ford Center. I'm like, what? I'm speaking there in 4 days. He told me his story, how he'd been using for years, how now he lived a mile from his mom's house. And prior to going into treatment, he couldn't even get out of bed to get to his mom's house. He couldn't go a mile. And then he looked at me and he said, Cliff, I just don't get how you do it. And I'm like, how I do what? Even after the treatment, I don't understand. How do you not hate yourself? We sat down and we talked about the difference between doing something bad and then beginning to believe that you yourself are bad. Shame. Shame is the one emotion, therapists will tell you, that you can't endure for a long period of time without changing your emotional state. It's not that you've done something bad, it's that you innately are bad. And so much of addiction is driven by that. We talked for about 90 minutes. And then I did something that was completely unexpected. I went home and I tore up my talk. And I showed up at that Annenberg Center 4 days later. The actors got up and they did 3 scenes from my book. I'm like, incredible. I get up there and I said, my main character doesn't know the difference between doing something bad and then beginning to believe he is bad. Do you know the difference? It is a tree we can all hang from. And I stayed in that moment for an hour, going step by step with what God was telling me and what I had shared with Rob. The first line of the book is, it's one thing to believe in something when you don't need it to be true. It's another when everything is writing on it. There are so many things that we all say we believe, beautiful, wonderful things of God. But until you're in that place and you need it to be true, that is a scary place to be. I went over the falls in my own life at age 26. I was, I grew up church, God, most central thing in my life. Went to USC. I was working at Disney. I was acting a little bit. I wasn't great, but I was getting some, you'll appreciate this, some under fives on a soap opera, Days of Our Lives. I had a French accent. Not a bad French accent. They're like, can you do a French accent? I'm like, oui. I'm like, yeah, I'll figure it out. I had this great apartment. I had a convertible. I had these wonderful friends in my life. Had a girlfriend at the time that I cared a lot about, and serving God in every way I could. And I started to get a series of fevers. And they were very high and unexplained. And the first 9 months or so, I had 7 fevers. The highest was 106.8. Wow. At one point, a friend came by and I was so out of it, he called my mom and they brought me to the house, and I have no memory of going there. But it was strange. I'd get the fever and then I'd have a measure of health, as if the fever had done something. But the doctors could not figure it out. doctor after doctor after doctor. In the first 7 years, I saw 70 doctors. Second year in, they said, whatever that initial thing was that broke your immunity, you now have Epstein-Barr on top of it. And I'm like, everybody has Epstein-Barr. That's kind of an overdiagnosed. And they go, no, no, no. If you're people, it's dangerous for whose immunity has been broken, like transplant patients, people who have fought bad infections. They sent me to National Jewish Hospital in Denver. And they said kind of the same thing at first. Oh, this is overdiagnosed. They actually treated me very poorly. I get home, the blood work came back, they called and apologized. At one point, I was still trying to hold on to my life. I was very thin, I was weak. But those first few months, they said I was going to be sick for 10 years. That's what they told me. And honestly, I just laughed inside. I'm like, you don't know me. I'm resilient. You have no 6 months tops, right? Good luck. I packed up my apartment quickly, thinking this is temporary. And my whole life, I just put it in the Sunday edition, a couple of copies of the Sunday edition of the LA Times. And 7 years of my life went by. 7 years. I became isolated. I didn't have a name. I couldn't say, oh, I have this or that. It was a mystery. So I was a little suspect with people. They're like, we know he's sick, but is he really sick? You know, I couldn't work. I moved back into the bedroom that I grew up in at my parents' house. I was always independent, type A, achiever. My life became so isolated, and friends fell away. Friends who I had been there for in their worst dark night of the soul just bailed. I was very lucky because I have a mom who is just an incredible woman of faith. And that woman believed this out of me, that I was going to be, you know, that there was a purpose in this and I was going to get to the other side. One of my favorite stories is 2 years in, I am in the bedroom. I am irritable as heck. I don't have a disposition of being depressed. I express it through irritability, you know? And my mom comes and knocks on my door. I'm like, what? She opens it up and I'm in bed. I had most of my energy in the morning and then my energy would drop and I'd spend the rest of the day in bed. And she had a cake that was lit and she was covered in streamers. And she goes, don't you know what today is? Don't you know what today is? I'm like, I don't know what today is. It's not my birthday, Mom. What is this, right? And she looked at me and she said, Cliff, this is your pity party. My mom threw me a pity party. It was the best thing that anyone had ever done. She said, for the next 2 or 3 hours, we're going to eat cake and we're going to talk about what a rotten deal this is. How all those people who you were there for should be at your front door, should be in that gap praying for you, should be there. How you were the good kid and you did all the church stuff and you didn't do the bad and this and that, right? And then when we're done, I'm going to kick you in the butt and we're going to start working the problem. And I will tell you, that was the turning point because most people will not move on and do what they can do until someone in the land of the living acknowledges what they feel, what they've been through. The Psalms, very few things were comforts. The Psalms were a comfort to me. David always acknowledged how he felt. And then he trusted what he knew about God. You've abandoned me. I'm in the pit. Are you going to show up? There are times when God shuts a door before the next window or door opens, when you're in that dark hallway and you're like, his mercies are new every morning. And you're going, is it morning yet? Because I think I'm a little low on mercies. And God bless my mom. I said, Mom, just pray. Pray that God opens a door. Just pray God opens a door. She goes, I'm not going to pray that. What? I'm Lebanese, so we got a lot of like, it's like being Italian, you know? Just I'm not praying that prayer. When God shows up, he's not going to open a door. He's going to rip off the roof.
Mm.
I had a recurring dream those 7 years. Probably had it 30 times, 25, 30 times. I would go back to my old apartment. I'd open the door and it would be covered in cobwebs, but everything would be in the exact same spot. The bookshelf with, all my faith books and all the plays from the scenes I was doing in acting class. All the picture frames with all my friends, the best moments of my life with my best friends who I was going to do life with for the rest of my life. My coffee cups, my toaster. And the neighbors would come by in this dream and they'd be like, oh my God, you came back. You finally came back. You forgot to come back. And then I'd wake up. Haunted, right? 7 years in, and there were a lot of dramatic stories in this, right? Because I could not figure out, I'm sparing some of the health details, right? That were pretty dramatic. But I couldn't figure out, and maybe some of you have been in this place. Was I Job? Or was I Paul? Was God going to restore me? This was temporary? Or was this a thorn in my side and I was going to have to endure it for the rest of my life? And I was either going to make it or not. I'm like, if I have another thorn in my side, I'm going to look like a porcupine. But what I realized was I was neither. The story in the Bible where the Jews are trying to trap Jesus in an argument, and they say, why is this man blind? Is it because of his sins or the sins of his parents? And I'm telling you, I bet that guy asked that question every day of his life. Why is this my reality? Am I cursed? Have I done something? Is this generational? And what did Jesus say? Neither. You were made blind so the Son of Man, Son of God, could be glorified in this moment. And then what did he do? He healed him. That guy's blindness was not about him or only about him. And what I had to learn is that God was up to something more than my healing. And there's a narcissism that can settle in because you guys know that, you're working your problem. You're trying to be responsible. You're trying to get to the other side of it. But I had to die to that. Faith, there's mystery. And I had to submit to the mystery that there is a purpose in this, whether I see it this side of heaven or not, whether I get well or not. And I will tell you, a lot of you know Joni Eareckson Tada, right? Amazing, paralyzed from a swimming accident when she was young. And she said something that was just so eye-opening. She said, you think you want answers. You think the answers that you're demanding of God are going to comfort you. But at 3 a.m, when your vertebrae are crushing and you can't even get a breath, answers don't help you. God offers something more than answers. He offers himself. And that's why this group, these relationships are so important. The incarnation. God became man. God loves humanity. Everyone was created in God's image. I'm not saying everyone goes to heaven. I'm not saying everyone is living a life that is pleasing to God. but they were created in his image and have value and worth simply by existing. And the enemy's greatest, goal is to get the creation, I'm convinced, to turn on itself because it bears the image of God. Seven years in, I got to a research center at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. And I was part of a pilot program. And what they found was they still don't know what that virus was that I got. The Epstein-Barr, which I learned to manage. But they realized that a bacteria had built up in my whole body over the 7 years. And my body was trying to kill it and was attacking itself. And the reason I was periodically having these high fevers, even still, is my body was trying to kill that bacteria. So it would take 3 hours to breathe into this thing every 15 minutes, and they'd measure it. And they said of the 800 patients they had seen over the pilot program, my case was the worst, whatever that means, overachiever. So they tried everything. They tried, antibiotics for months, high doses. They gave me pre-digested food that they give to stroke patients. It was the most rancid thing in the world because when you eat, it feeds the bacteria, it never dies. So this pre-digested food, they try to minimize it. It didn't work. So finally I said to the doctor, Dr. Henry Lin, I remember it like it was yesterday. I'm like, what will work? Come on, I'm desperate here. It's been years. And I wanted to be healed less for the health benefit, more to kind of clear my name that this was real, which is crazy, right? And he said, maybe a fast. I'm like 3 days before Easter? Like, that's all? Count me in. He goes, no, it would have to be a water-only fast for 10 and a half days, 10, 11 days. And I looked right at him. I'm like, okay. He goes, okay, you're going to do a water fast for 10, 11 days? What he didn't understand is in that moment, and I know people on this call have been in this place. I know it. In that moment, I was so desperate to be healed. I had finally gotten to the place where I would have done anything. So that's what it was. It was 10 and a half days, water only. And in truth, the first 3 days, after the first 3 days, your appetite's suppressed. So it's the idea of food. But I swear to you, I had to go in there every 3 days for that test to see the levels. And the only magazine they had in there was Bon Appetit. I'm sitting here for 3 hours and the only magazine, and I'm looking at this like, what was amazing was after the 10 and a half days, it was eradicated. And instantly, I had a new measure of health. I wasn't 100%. My body was messed up from the fast. But I had a new measure of health. And what I realized in that moment is you don't know how sick you were until you experience health again. And I think that's one of the reasons I can connect with addicts. Until they get sober, they don't realize the depth of the place that they were in. Do you remember the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks? I cry like a baby in that thing. And it's not when he's on the island. It's when he tries to come home. And time has just moved on. And that was really a little bit like my experience. 7 years in, I'm on a path to being healthy. It took another year. There was a personal trainer. It's a great story. That's probably another call to talk about. But he really helped me rebuild my body. I'm like, I can't afford you. He was one of these celebrity trainers. He would train Jerry Bruckheimer and all his stars for the action movies, Ben Affleck, all those people. I'm like, I can't afford you, but I can afford you once. And so I made an appointment with him, and I walk in and there's Cindy Crawford and I mean, you name it. Sally, everybody's in this gym. And he took an interest in me because of my story. And he helped me over 10 weeks, like rebuild my body and teach me how to do it. So here I'm like healthy again and reemerging into life. And time has just moved on. Everyone's married with kids. Have advanced in their careers. And I'm out of sync. And you have to begin to imagine a life beyond the first dream of what you thought it would be. Something really remarkable. The book came out and I'm healthy and I'm getting this attention, but I am still living an isolated life. I didn't want to rejoin the world, really. And I got an invitation to a friend, like one of the few friends who stuck with me, had moved to Pasadena and was having a Christmas party. And she goes, Cliff, I know you never go to these things. Would you just, for my sake, would you just show up for 10 minutes? I want to see you. I want to give you a hug. And so I reluctantly said yes. So I drove, and I realized right away, the street was packed with cars. And I realized this was kitty corner to my old apartment. No exaggeration. I mean, there's no dramatic effect here. I am telling you the truth, all these stories. The only parking spot was in front of my old place. I didn't even drive by my old place over those 7 years. It was just too painful. That was my old life. I get out of the car and there are all these elaborate Christmas decorations. There's this young man doing them. You could tell he spray painted the pumpkins to make them snowmen. And, it just wacky Christmas decorations. And I looked at him, I said, I want to encourage him a little bit. I'm like, great job. Wow, you've worked hard. He goes, I really try, and I said, I used to live here in that apartment up there, the one on the corner with the fireplace and hardwood floors. And he said, that's my apartment. And then he said something that just gave me a chill throughout my, whole body and spirit. He said, do you want to see it? I'm like, yeah. I mean, something inside of me answered before I could say no. I walked up the stairs, the smell of that inside the carpet, right? Open the door. I step inside. And over the fireplace, there's this gold leaf like emblem. And I said, you know what? My girlfriend gave me that at the time. And I hammered that on there. They're like, we always wondered where that came from. And I'm like, different furniture and different decorations, but I just, I looked at the refrigerator. I looked at, that was my fridge. That was my closet. My old life. I finally had come back. I walked down those stairs and crossed the street. And one thing was crystal clear. Whatever laid ahead, it was time for a new dream. It was time for a new dream. I still, looking back, I say, I wonder if it would have made a difference if I had been privy to God's plan. And I want to say this, restoration isn't what you think it is. It's not that I got in great shape with a celebrity personal trainer and I have a book that became a bestseller and, right? That's all nice. Restoration is feeling whole. Restoration is feeling how you're connected to God, yourself, and each other. It's being comfortable in your skin and being able to exhale and be like, whatever happens, I'm okay. And sometimes God shows us his plans, and sometimes, very often, we're on a need-to-know basis. And there's an arrogance that we want God to fit into our dream, right? That's my whole problem with the law of attraction and all that. I'm like, just the arrogance of, this is the dream, and come on, God, do it this way. When it's so much more satisfying to play a little role in something he's doing. And I'll tell you, those experiences in my life are not the ones that are on the stage with the spotlight. They're quiet things that God allows me to take part in. It's the humanity, it's people. There was a woman who, it got picked like one community, one book of the year for this, city, and they did this big thing. And there was this woman on the stage. They had people who'd been impacted by the book, and Marie. And the first time I had met Marie, she said right away, "I don't believe in God." I'm like, "That's okay. I don't get a commission, like, well, they had Marie there. And what she said was, "I always knew I'd have to stand before God." See, she did believe. "I would always have to stand before God for the things I had done in life. But I didn't know if God would understand the context of those choices that I made." And she said, "This book gave me permission to love myself for the first time." I can't take credit for that. I was allowed to play a role in something God was doing in her life, a little role. But the idea that someone has permission to love themselves, to not hate themselves. She then said she had flown to Denver to tell her father that she forgave him. And only in that moment did we realize that it had been childhood sexual abuse. And what this woman who now had HIV from being very promiscuous in her life, but that was connected to something, right? God knows our stories. Self-acceptance, the older I get, it's not, I know it's not condoning sin. We're responsible for our actions, their consequences, right? But I feel like it's an acknowledgement of the reality of where we're at right now. And doing that in tandem with God's acceptance and love of us in this moment right now. This reality and this reality. Those two realities existing together is the only chance we have to move beyond some things that are unhealthy for us, to change, to grow, to be sanctified. But it's in a relationship. It's not a carrot on a stick. You get this right, now I'm going to love you. That acceptance of God. I'm going to wrap this up with just a few things here. One, this week I printed out the third draft of the follow-up book. And we'll see what, as close to being done. But that really is about people who are stuck. It's fiction, but it's about a concept that I've come up with called the idolatry of pain. For what is idolatry but worshiping the part as if it were the whole? Suffering, we share in the suffering of Christ. It's not the end goal. We go through it. We want to be Christ-like. Well, his journey went through suffering. But God is up to more than that. What I want to leave you with is, it is a choice to believe you are the beloved of God. It's a truth, but it's a choice. It's like a spotlight that is on you, and you turn in that spotlight and you bask in it. You find your identity in it. You can turn away from that light and hate yourself, but that's not going away. This is a choice. It's a choice. God will get you to where he needs you to be, but he will do that in a relationship. My restoration verse was 1 Peter 5:10 throughout my whole trial. After you have suffered a little while, he himself will restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast. And I'm telling you, whatever that looks like, count me in. Thank you guys so much. Um, really appreciate the opportunity to share this.
David, you're muted.
Oh, okay.
David, you're muted. Thank you, Cliff.
Sure,
Do
sure.
people- That's the second time I got to hear that, and it sunk in even more this time, Cliff. You've got such an amazing story.
Truly, what a gift. Thank you. Thank you. It
I know what
blessed
you've been
me
going
in so
through.
many ways.
Thank you. Praying for you. Yeah, praying for you.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
Thank you. One thing I didn't say that was 2 years ago, I had spoken in Orange County. I was driving back and my mom called me and she said, your dad was in the attic and he found a box and it's yours. I'm like, we have an attic? So it was a crawl space. And I'm like, you sure it's mine? And she said, yeah, it says Cliff's box. And I said, what's in it? And she said, we figured, you know, after everything that's happened, you should be the one to open it. What you have to understand, it was now 18 years had gone by. Everything that I had packed up in a rush in that apartment had either been given away, thrown away, or repurposed somehow for somebody else in the family. There was nothing left of that old life except this one box. And I drive home. It's on there. My parents aren't home. I'm like, what is in this? I open it up. And the first thing I see is from April 1997, the Sunday edition of the LA Times, that this item is wrapped in. When I was in a hurry thinking I'm leaving for just a little bit. And I opened it up and it was my Christmas nativity. I had bought this beautiful nativity. And literally I open it up and it's Jesus in a crib. That was all that was left of that old life. What was even more remarkable, or equally remarkable, was the section of the newspaper that it was wrapped in from the Sunday edition. It was the book section. I wasn't an author back then. I was trying to be an actor. And not only that, 1 block away, there is a famous bookstore. It's one of the most famous bookstores in the country in Pasadena called Vroman's. It's 125 years old. It is 1 block from that old apartment. That's where I became a bestseller first and had my first book signing. It was like God was restoring me on the same soil where I was convinced everything had come to an end. But what was amazing was it was Christ who remained through all those years. So, yeah. I finished my follow-up novel and it's pretty powerful. I am flirting with the idea of what I've resisted for all these years of writing a book called The Last Box, which is the story that I shared with you. And I've always resisted it because I just feel like, oh, it's all about me. It's so self-indulgent, you know, I don't want to write a memoir, but I'm flirting with the idea. So that might be what I do next now that the novel's done. But thank you guys so much.
Cliff, you are a great storyteller, a fabulous wordsmith, and a wonderful deep thinker. And I really appreciated what you gave us today. Thank you for that gift.
Thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cliff, I just can say that I'm sitting in the midst of a trial, and anybody who's in the midst of anything, which we all are all the time, either just coming through or just about to go into one.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate your willingness to be swept away. That's the sense that I got all through your talk. Your willingness to be swept away into the whirlwind, what God orchestrated so clearly, without your knowledge or permission. And yet you went on the journey. And he let you walk on dry shod, and we're walking there with you. And I can't wait to read your second book. If that makes sense.
Thank you. Now I'm crying. Thank you. Beautiful.
I think we're all a little teary-eyed at this point. Yeah.
Well, I want you to know, all of you, I'm here for you. You know, I love being a part of this group. And I've been blessed by your stories and the comments, what you have shared, you know, not just today. I mean, what you share every month when we're on the call, you share pieces of yourself. And in doing so, you share God. So thank you.
Mm.
Thanks, Cliff. It's a blessing knowing you. And I mean, I feel like, because I got to meet you in person.
Yeah, we met. He came out here.
Yeah.
If any of you guys are in California, please let me know.
Yeah.
Where are you exactly, Cliff? Where in California?
I'm in a little city. I'm by Pasadena. I'm in a little city called San Marino.
Ah,
And San Marino, our claim to fame is Father of the Bride was filmed here.
Uh-huh.
and literally the Father of the Bride house is 1 block on the same street from my old apartment. But yeah, I grew up in San Marino, from Boston, but when I was young, we moved here. And yeah, I've got great parents. I am very blessed. They were there for me, and now I'm there for them. And but you guys are all welcome. Trust me, you'll only be in danger of getting fat because I'll cook for you or take you out. As will I. But
food
And
is
I
our-
think we would like to get you out here as well. So,
yeah, love it.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm supposed to see the guy who did my audiobook. The other thing he did is he won a Tony on Broadway.
Oh my God.
He was the lead in Tootsie. And so he's just a really great Italian, guy. Exactly. He had a little kid. It was during COVID. And so he did it. But yeah, I'm supposed to see him, and I have another reason to come out there, but I'll find a time when it makes sense for you guys, because I'd love to see,
That would be a treat.
Sure will. Yeah.